"You're not part of this family," she told me. Her words cut through the room like a blade against glass. The sound of silverware tapping on plates went still. I nodded slowly, pretending her sentence was just air, nothing more. Inside, my chest locked tight. My throat felt scraped raw, but I didn't argue. I folded my napkin with care, as though my shaking hands needed something to do. The smile she wore was thin, a victorious curl. Around us, no one moved. My husband shifted in his seat, eyes darting between me and his mother, but he said nothing. My father-in-law looked down at his soup, stirring what was already cold. The cousins kept glancing, waiting for drama, hoping maybe they could gossip about it later. I stayed silent. Then my phone buzzed inside my bag. A notification! I didn't check it right away, but the vibration rattled through my body like a secret trying to get out. I held still, pressing my palm against the fabric, as if hiding it could keep the moment contained. What I didn't know yet was that alert would show me documents with my name erased. It would prove she had been moving pieces behind my back for months. But in that instant, I only sat there, nodding once, twice, as though I had accepted her verdict. My husband opened his mouth, closed it again. His eyes asked me to stay calm. I stayed calm. I always did. It wasn't the first time she tried to peel me away from the family portrait she curated so carefully. It was simply the boldest. Every holiday carried its warning signs. Thanksgiving, when she slid a separate plate toward me and said it was better I eat in the kitchen so the kids had more room. Christmas, when she wrapped matching pajamas for everyone but me, then laughed and said they forgot my size. Weddings, birthdays, barbecues, it was always a quiet exclusion, never loud. Until tonight, the words she spoke still echoed in my head. Not part of this family. It wasn't a whisper meant to scold in private. It was a declaration, a performance. She wanted the audience, and she had it. The air smelled of roasted chicken, but beneath it lingered something sharper, the metallic taste of humiliation. My cheeks burned, though. I forced them into neutrality. I pushed my chair back, the scrape of wood against tile startling in its volume. No one asked me to stay seated. No one said I belonged. I left the table. Not quickly, not dramatically, but with deliberate calm. My footsteps measured, each one steady, though my insides screamed to run. Behind me, I heard her laugh softly, as though she had won. In the hallway, I finally checked my phone. The alert lit the screen with sterile brightness. My bank app had flagged unusual activity. I opened it, my pulse loud in my ears. There they were, copies of household documents, scanned into my account by mistake. My name, once neatly written, was crossed out. In its place, hers. Her signature bold, smug, sprawling across the lines that had once held my identity in their home. My lips parted, but no sound came. I stood frozen in that narrow hall, staring at the glowing screen, until my husband appeared at my side. His face pale, whispering urgently, "Please, don't say anything. Not yet." I looked at him, searching for loyalty in his eyes. His hand hovered near mine, not daring to touch, afraid to choose sides. I slipped the phone back into my bag, nodded again, the same way I had at the table. But inside me, something shifted. It wasn't rage, not yet. It was clarity. A quiet understanding that this night was different. This wasn't another petty slight, another cut disguised as tradition. This was an attempt to erase me. And people who try to erase you don't stop until you stop them. Driving home later, the streets blurred under yellow street lamps. My husband drove in silence. I stared out the window, watching my reflection overlay the night, and thought about all the times I let her win. The dinners where I swallowed her insults with cold wine. The mornings where I ironed her curtains while she bragged about how her other daughter-in-law knew her place. The photos where I stood in the back row, half-cropped, half-forgotten. Each memory layered itself on my shoulders, heavier with every mile we passed. By the time we reached our house, I could hardly breathe. I went straight to the desk, pulled out folders, receipts, everything I had saved without really knowing why. I spread them across the table under the harsh kitchen light. My husband lingered in the doorway, uncertain whether to speak. I didn't invite him. Page after page, her fingerprints were everywhere. Quiet changes, small signatures, adjustments she thought no one would notice. but I noticed. And with that phone alert, I finally had proof. The night bled into early morning. My eyes blurred, but my hands moved steady, scanning, saving, filing. At dawn, I looked at the pile I had built, evidence of a campaign to push me out of a family I had spent years trying to build peace with. I thought about calling her, screaming into the phone, demanding answers. I thought about storming back into her house, slamming the papers down on her polished table. But I didn't. Instead, I brewed coffee, sat in silence, and dialed a different number. The woman on the other end answered briskly. Detective Alvarez. Her tone was calm, clipped, the kind that made you believe she had seen worse and handled it. I told her I had something she might want to see. Documents, signatures, alterations that pointed to fraud. She listened, asked me to bring everything to the station. I glanced at the window, where the first light of morning had turned the glass pale blue. My husband still sat in the living room, head in his hands. I didn't speak to him. I gathered the files, tucked them into a folder, and slid them into my bag. When I stood, my legs trembled, but not from fear, from resolve. The next day, police came. The invitation had arrived in a tone too sweet to be real. A casual message from my mother-in-law, sent 3 days earlier, written as if she were doing me a favor. Family dinner Saturday night. Everyone will be here. We'd love for you to join. I remember staring at the screen, sensing the weight behind every polite word. We'd love for you to join. Not you're welcome, not we need you here, just that vague phrasing that felt more like an obligation than a genuine request. My stomach tightened, but I typed back, yes, because that is what I always did. I kept showing up, no matter how many times I left feeling smaller than when I entered. On Saturday afternoon, as I dressed, there was a tension beneath my skin I couldn't shake. The mirror showed a calm face, careful makeup, hair pinned in place, but my hands hesitated over every choice. Which dress would look appropriate enough not to spark a comment? Which earrings would be simple enough not to be called showy? It was like preparing for a performance where the audience already hated me, yet still expected a flawless act. The drive over was quiet. My husband tapped the steering wheel to the rhythm of a song on the radio, but I barely heard it. Outside, the neighborhood glowed in warm light, children riding bikes, sprinklers ticking across lawns. Everything looked like peace, yet inside me, dread pressed heavy. When we pulled into the driveway, I felt it, that familiar chill, though the evening air was still warm. The curtains in the living room shifted slightly, as if someone had been watching. My chest clenched. My husband noticed me pause before getting out of the car. He placed a hand on my arm, murmured, "It's just dinner, don't let her get to you." His voice was soft, but even he didn't sound convinced. I walked into the house carrying that knot of unease. The kitchen smelled of roasted chicken, garlic, and thyme, but even the scent of food couldn't mask the undercurrent. I saw their eyes when I stepped through the door. Quick glances, then polite smiles too thin to reach the eyes. My father-in-law waved from his chair, already settled with a glass of wine. My husband's cousins murmured hellos, and my mother-in-law, perfectly poised, greeted me with the kind of hug that barely touched. Her perfume stung sharp, cloying, like sugar gone bitter. As we sat, I studied the table. Silver polished to gleam, plates set with folded napkins, the family crest embroidered on each. My seat was not beside my husband. She had arranged the chairs, so I sat closer to the children, further from the center. Subtle, but not accidental. She never did anything without purpose. The meal began with chatter, but I felt the tension weaving through it. Every laugh was a little too forced. Every story told by her lingered just long enough to push me into silence. I smiled when expected, nodded when required. Yet under it all, something in me knew tonight wasn't just another dinner. Tonight was a stage. I tried to distract myself with details, the clink of crystal glasses, the way candlelight shimmered against polished cutlery, the faint hum of the refrigerator in the background. But those small things only heightened my sense of being out of place, like noticing the wallpaper in a room where you know you don't belong. Then came the moment. Her voice cut through the small talk. Cold, deliberate, loud enough for every ear. "You're not part of this family." But the truth is, I had known it long before she said it out loud. The unease wasn't new. It had been building for years, hidden behind gestures that could be explained away, but never forgotten. The Christmas when she gave every grandchild a wrapped present, except mine. "We must have misplaced it," she said with a laugh. My son's face had fallen, and I had swallowed my anger to keep the peace. The summer barbecue, where she arranged a family photo, waving everyone into place, then told me to stand off to the side. "We'll take one with just family first." The camera flashed as if I were invisible. Later, she let me step in for another picture, but my spot was behind a tree branch, my face half hidden. Even smaller things carried their sting. Introducing me to guests, not as her daughter-in-law, but as my son's wife. Correcting how I cooked her recipes, reminding me that no one could make them right except her. Leaving me out of group messages, then claiming it was an accident. Always small enough to be denied, yet sharp enough to cut. So, when the words finally came, they weren't a surprise. They were confirmation. A truth long implied, now spoken into the air like a curse. In that moment, I understood the silence of the others. They had grown used to her power. To them, her cruelty wasn't shocking anymore. It was tradition, and traditions are hard to break. I nodded, because I knew my reaction would be remembered longer than her insult. Anger would only serve her. Tears would only satisfy her. But silence, calm, that was my choice. It was the one weapon she couldn't twist. Later that night, when my phone vibrated with that unexpected alert, I realized the dread hadn't been unfounded. My gut had been warning me for days. Something was coming. Something bigger than just a cruel sentence at a dinner table. I sat awake long after we got home, replaying every sign I had ignored. The way she had smiled when sending that invitation, the way the family's voices dimmed when I entered the room, the way my husband's hand trembled slightly when he told me not to let her get to me. It had all been leading here, to that sentence, to the quiet nod, to the evidence waiting in my phone. The truth was clear now. She hadn't just wanted me humiliated, she wanted me erased. And deep down, I knew this wasn't just about family dynamics anymore. This was about control, about ownership, about power she refused to share. My reflection stared back at me from the darkened window as dawn crept closer. For the first time in years, I didn't just feel like a victim of her schemes. I felt ready, because when someone tells you you're not part of the family, they're really daring you to prove how wrong they are. And I intended to prove it. This was not the first time she had tried to cut me out. Her words at the dinner table may have been the sharpest, but the blade had been honed for years. The truth is, my story with her began long before that evening, in countless small moments that should have warned me. I remember one of the earliest, just weeks after my wedding. The house was filled with congratulations, with neighbors dropping off flowers, with cousins toasting to our future. She stood at the center of it all, gracious and glowing, like the queen of her kingdom. When guests asked her about me, she answered with that smooth smile. "She is adjusting. We are still teaching her how our family does things." The words sounded innocent, but the tone carried ownership. I was not her equal. I was a project. Later that night, she pulled me aside in the kitchen while my husband laughed with his cousins. She pointed at the cake knife still resting on the counter. "In this house, we cut from the center, not the side. Cutting from the side makes the cake collapse." Her eyes stayed fixed on mine. I nodded, embarrassed, though I had not touched the cake. The message was clear. Even when I did nothing, I would be corrected. Months later came the holiday dinner, my first Christmas as part of their family. I wore a red dress I had saved up for, nothing extravagant, just enough to feel festive. When I entered the room, she glanced at me, then turned to her daughter with a loud smile. "See, this is why I always tell you to wear simple clothes. Nothing too loud." Her daughter, in plain beige, laughed on cue. I stood there, heat rushing up my neck, pretending not to understand. But I understood. The lesson was always for me, never for her. Another time, on my son's 3rd birthday, I brought out a cake shaped like a train because he loved locomotives. His eyes lit up, his little hands clapping with joy. She leaned close to him, speaking loudly enough for everyone to hear. "Trains are for boys who need discipline. Too much sugar will make you weak." My son's smile faltered, his hand dropping to his side. I wanted to scream. Instead, I sliced the cake, handed him the biggest piece, and whispered, "You can have as much as you want." But the moment was already stained. Her power came from subtle repetition, always disguised as tradition, as advice, as concern. Once at a family barbecue, she told me to sit down while the other women prepared the food. "You are not used to our recipes," she said. I sat, feeling useless, while the others worked. Later, she scolded me for being lazy, for not helping. Her words were crafted so she could never lose. I carried these memories like stones in my pocket, each one heavy, but never enough to make me sink. I told myself I could endure, that keeping peace was more important than keeping pride. I reminded myself that my husband loved me, that he was worth the silence, that our children deserved stability, even if it cost me my voice. But the pattern never stopped. At family photos, she directed everyone where to stand. My place was always in the back. "Taller people in the rear," she explained, though I was not taller than her daughter. At birthdays, she would pour champagne and lift a glass, thanking her children for their loyalty. When she glanced at me, it was with a nod, as if I were a guest rather than family. The cruelest moment came at our wedding anniversary dinner, 5 years in. We gathered at a restaurant, the whole family seated at a long table. She stood to give a toast. Her words praised my husband for his strength, his loyalty, his achievements. Then she looked at me and said, "And we thank her for supporting him." That was all. Not my name, not my role as wife and mother, just her. As though I were a footnote to his story. The applause that followed felt like nails in my skin. Through it all, I stayed quiet. I told myself it was easier. I believed the stories women tell themselves when trapped between love and humiliation. That silence was strength. That ignoring insults would make them fade. That one day she would soften. But the truth was, silence only sharpened her power. The dinner when she said I was not part of the family was not a sudden cruelty. It was the harvest of years of planting. Every jab, every exclusion, every smirk had been steps on the path to that night. And I had let it continue, because I thought enduring would protect my children, because I thought avoiding conflict would shield my husband, because I thought my worth could withstand her attempts to erase me. Looking back, I see how wrong I was. My silence did not protect anyone. It only taught her that I could be erased without consequence. That I would keep coming back, keep sitting at her table, keep swallowing the poison with a smile. That night, as I stared at the documents on my phone, I understood the truth I had avoided for too long. She was not just cruel. She was calculated. She was building a world where I no longer existed. And she had been practicing for years. The memories swirled through me like smoke. The Christmas without a gift. The photo where I stood half-hidden. The birthday toast where I was nameless. The barbecue where I was accused of laziness. Each one a cut that bled quietly into the next. I realized then that my nod at the dinner table was not just surrender. It was the final act of silence I would ever give her. Because when you see the pattern clearly, when you understand that the cruelty is not random but designed, you stop waiting for it to change. You start planning to change it yourself. I closed my eyes, leaning back against the chair in my own kitchen, the folder of evidence spread across the table. For the first time, I did not feel ashamed for remembering every slight. I felt prepared. Each memory was not a burden anymore. It was proof. And proof, unlike insults, does not vanish in silence. The dining room was warm with candlelight, but the air carried a weight heavier than any glow could soften. Plates clinked softly, forks scraped against porcelain, and laughter rippled in short, nervous bursts. I sat at the long oak table, trying to steady my breath. My glass of water trembled slightly in my hand, though I held it tightly. The roasted chicken sat in the center, steam rising with the scent of garlic and rosemary. It should have been comforting, but the smell turned sharp in my nose, almost bitter. A vase of white lilies sat nearby, their fragrance mixing with the food in a way that made my stomach churn. Across from me, my mother-in-law presided like a queen, her smile perfectly shaped, her earrings catching the light. She reached for her wine with a casual grace, as if the evening was simply another stage she commanded. My husband sat beside her, shoulders tense, eyes lowered. The cousins whispered to one another, passing bread rolls, stealing glances at me. I felt the tension coil tighter with every passing second. My palms pressed against my knees under the table, my heartbeat pounding against my ribs. Something inside me knew she was preparing for a strike. I had felt it before, but tonight, the silence around her words was louder than usual. Then it came. She set her wineglass down with a deliberate clink, her eyes fixed on me. Her voice was calm, but sharp enough to cut through the entire room. "You're not part of this family." The words did not echo. They landed like a stone dropped into still water, sending invisible ripples across the table. The cousins froze mid-bite. My father-in-law coughed, then buried his face in his napkin. My husband lifted his head, mouth opening as if to speak, but no sound came out. My throat burned. The room seemed to tilt slightly, the edges of the table blurring. Yet I did not speak. I nodded slowly, my face carefully arranged, every muscle locked into calmness. Inside, my body reacted in ways I could not control. My hands felt icy, though heat flushed my cheeks. My breathing turned shallow, each inhale tight, each exhale forced. I watched her lean back in her chair, satisfied. Her lips curled in that thin, victorious smile, the kind she wore when she believed she had won. She reached for her fork, as if her declaration was nothing more than a passing comment. The silence stretched long. Every sound became amplified. The crackle of chicken skin as a knife pressed into it. The drip of condensation sliding down my water glass. The faint hum of the refrigerator in the adjoining kitchen. Even the clock on the wall seemed louder, each tick reminding me that I was still there, still breathing, still enduring. I shifted slightly in my seat. My chair creaked, the sound harsh in the tense room. I folded my napkin carefully, placing it on the table with steady hands. My husband's eyes flicked to mine, wide and uncertain. His lips pressed into a thin line. He wanted me to stay quiet. He wanted me to let it pass. But I saw something else. I saw the children at the end of the table, watching without understanding. Their eyes darted between us, confusion clouding their faces. They did not grasp the weight of the words. Not fully, but they felt the chill. And in that moment, I realized silence was not only about me anymore. I rose slowly, the wooden legs of the chair scraping against the tile. The sound was startling, sharp, impossible to ignore. Every head turned toward me. I stood tall, though my knees threatened to give way. "I see," I said quietly. My voice sounded steadier than I felt. My mother-in-law tilted her head, amused, as though expecting a small protest she could easily crush. I did not give her one. Instead, I let the pause hang heavy. The tension thickened, pressing against every chest in the room. The cousins shifted uncomfortably. My father-in-law cleared his throat again, but said nothing. My husband lowered his eyes once more, unable to meet mine. I picked up my bag from beside my chair. The leather strap felt cool in my hand, grounding me. I slipped it over my shoulder with deliberate calm. Then I looked directly at her, meeting her eyes without blinking. "If that's how you see it," I said, "then I will remember." Her smile faltered. Just slightly, almost imperceptibly, but I caught it. The crack in her composure was small, yet enough to show that my calm unsettled her more than any outburst could. I turned, stepping toward the hallway. The sound of my heels against the floor echoed in the silence. Behind me, whispers began to stir, low and uneasy. Someone dropped a fork. The children whispered questions to one another. Still, no one stopped me. In the hallway, I paused, my back against the wall. My pulse thundered, my breath shallow. I pulled my phone from my bag, the screen lighting up the dim space. There it was again, the alert. Documents scanned, my name missing. Her signature bold. My throat tightened as I stared, realizing the depth of what she had been doing. Behind me, voices rose again at the table. I heard her laugh, sharp and dismissive. "She'll be fine, she always comes back." But I knew I would not come back, not in the same way. I slid the phone back into my bag, straightened my shoulders, and walked toward the door. The cool night air greeted me as I stepped outside, a stark contrast to the heavy suffocation inside. I inhaled deeply, the scent of pine and faint smoke from a neighbor's fireplace filling my lungs. For the first time all evening, I could breathe. The house glowed behind me, windows warm with light, but I no longer felt drawn to it. My footsteps on the gravel driveway sounded louder than they should have, like a drumbeat marking the end of something. I opened the car door, slid inside, and sat for a long moment. My hands rested on the steering wheel, trembling slightly. My husband appeared a few minutes later, face pale, eyes searching mine. He did not speak. He simply sat in the driver's seat, started the engine, and pulled away. The house grew smaller in the rearview mirror. My chest loosened, but my mind stayed sharp. Her words echoed, repeating themselves over and over. Not part of this family. Not part of this family. Yet as the road stretched ahead, I realized she had given me something she did not intend. By saying it out loud, she had given me proof, not just of cruelty, but of intent. And with proof, I could act. I leaned back, eyes on the blur of passing streetlights, and whispered to myself, "She will see what happens next." The night after that dinner did not end in silence. It began quietly enough, with the hum of the car engine and the rhythm of tires rolling against the road. But by the time we reached home, the quiet had shifted into something else. My husband walked inside without a word, dropped his keys on the counter, and sank into the couch. I stayed at the kitchen table with the folder of evidence spread before me. The phone rang first. Her number lit up the screen. I let it ring until it stopped. A minute later, it rang again. Then again. Each time her name appeared, my chest tightened. Finally, I answered. Her voice came sharp, wrapped in false concern. "You embarrassed yourself tonight. You think walking out makes you stronger. It makes you pathetic." I stayed silent. She hated silence more than anger. When I did not respond, she pushed harder. "You need to understand your place. This family is built without you. We've already taken care of everything." I finally spoke, my tone low, even. "Yes, I saw the documents." There was a pause. Just a beat, but enough to hear her inhale sharply. Then she laughed. "You don't understand what you're talking about. Don't make a fool of yourself." I ended the call without another word. My hands shook, but not from fear. From certainty. She knew I had proof. The next morning, the storm arrived. I woke to pounding on the door. Not gentle knocks, but fists demanding entry. My husband rushed to the window, then froze. His mother and father stood outside, faces tight with fury. Behind them, my brother-in-law lingered, arms crossed. I opened the door before they could break it down. She barged past me, heels striking the floor like gavel blows. My father-in-law followed, his face red, muttering under his breath. She spun toward me, eyes blazing. "You dare call the police? You dare bring outsiders into family business?" I stayed by the door, gripping the handle so tightly my knuckles whitened. "Outsiders? You made me an outsider long ago." "And yes," I called, "because what you're doing is not family business. It's fraud." Her laughter was sharp, brittle. "Fraud? You think anyone will believe you? I built this family. I hold it together. You're nothing but a guest who overstayed." My husband tried to speak. "Mom, stop." She cut him off with a glare. "Quiet. This is between us." The room swelled with tension. My father-in-law paced in circles, muttering about shame and loyalty. My brother-in-law sneered, arms folded as if he were watching a play. I reached into my bag and pulled out the folder. Pages slipped across the table like cards in a game. "These signatures are not mistakes. These transfers are not oversights. You erased my name from accounts, from property, from documents that were legally binding. You signed in my place. That's fraud." For the first time, her face faltered. Just for a moment, the mask slipped. Then she regained it, chin lifting. "Even if that were true, who would listen to you? The police do not care about family squabbles." As if summoned by her words, there was another knock at the door. This time measured, steady, accompanied by the voice of authority. "Police, open up." The room froze. My husband looked at me, his face pale. My father-in-law stopped pacing. My brother-in-law muttered a curse under his breath. She, however, remained still, her smile thin but unshaken. I opened the door. 2 officers stepped inside, their presence filling the space. They greeted calmly, hands resting lightly on their belts, eyes scanning the tension that hung thick in the room. One officer spoke. "We received a report about possible document tampering and harassment. We'll need to ask some questions." Her voice turned honey-sweet. "Officers, this is just a misunderstanding. Families fight. Emotions run high. She's exaggerating. The officer did not smile. Ma'am, we'll still need to see the documents. I gathered the pages quickly, laying them out across the table. The officers leaned over, eyes sharp, pens moving against their notepads. One of them asked me to explain. I told them about the alert, the files, the erased signatures. My voice stayed steady, though inside I trembled. She tried to interrupt, but the officer raised a hand. Please wait your turn. For once, she had no choice but to stay silent. The questioning stretched long, each detail examined, each page noted. My husband sat rigid, staring at the floor. My father-in-law muttered about betrayal, but quieter now. My brother-in-law drifted toward the hallway, restless. When the officers finally stood, their tone was firm. This is now under investigation. No one here should interfere with the complainant until this is resolved. We'll be in contact. Her mask cracked again. You cannot do this. This is my family. The officer met her eyes evenly. And this is the law. Oh. They left as calmly as they had arrived. The door closed behind them with a soft click that sounded louder than thunder. The room erupted. You've destroyed us, my father-in-law barked. Do you know what this means? Our name will be dragged through the mud. My brother-in-law shouted. You're pathetic, running to strangers because you can't handle family matters. But I stayed steady. I gathered the documents back into my folder, each page sliding neatly into place. My movements were calm, deliberate. I did not match their volume. I only spoke once more. You told me I was not part of this family. You were right. I am not. But I am part of the truth, and the truth is stronger than your lies. Her face hardened, but her eyes betrayed something else. Not just anger, fear. They stormed out, voices echoing down the hallway, the doors slamming shut behind them. My husband remained seated, silent, his face a mixture of shame and uncertainty. I stood in the quiet that followed, my folder pressed against my chest. The confrontation was over, but the war had only just begun. The house was quiet after they stormed out, but it was not the peace I wanted. My husband sat on the couch, head in his hands, while I stood in the center of the room, with the folder pressed against my chest. The silence between us was heavy. I waited for him to speak, but he never did. That told me more than words ever could. The days that followed blurred into a strange mix of phone calls and paperwork. The police called twice, each time asking for clarification, each time thanking me for cooperating. I provided every file, every screenshot, every small detail I had saved over the years. It felt exhausting, but also cleansing. For once, I was not swallowing the poison. I was handing it over, piece by piece, to people who could turn it into evidence. My mother-in-law tried to fight back. She called relatives, spinning her version of the story. She told them I had betrayed the family, that I had exaggerated, that I was trying to ruin them out of jealousy. Some of them believed her. I saw their posts on social media, vague lines about loyalty and outsiders, but others sent me quiet messages of support. They had seen the way she treated me. They knew. One morning, a cousin came to my door. She stood awkwardly with 2 coffees in her hands. I know what she did, she whispered. She told everyone you were unstable, but I saw the documents. You're not crazy. You're brave. That word stayed with me. Brave. I had not felt brave in years, but hearing it made something inside me shift. The investigation stretched longer than I expected. Weeks passed. Then one afternoon, a plain envelope arrived in the mail. Inside was a letter from the police department, confirming that charges for fraud and falsification of documents were being filed. I sat at the kitchen table, reading the words over and over, until the letters blurred. My husband hovered near the doorway, pale and silent. He did not deny it. He did not defend her. He simply looked at me, defeated. That evening, I booked an appointment for my son and me at a salon downtown. It might sound trivial, but it felt important. My son had been quiet since the dinner, sensing the tension even if he could not understand it all. I wanted him to see something different. I wanted him to see that we could still celebrate ourselves, even after being told we did not belong. The stylist welcomed us warmly, draping a cape around my shoulders, combing through my hair with gentle care. My son sat in the next chair, legs swinging, eyes brightening as the stylist joked with him. The scissors snipped, the blow dryer hummed, and for the first time in weeks, I felt light. When the stylist turned my chair to face the mirror, I barely recognized the woman staring back. She looked calmer, stronger, like someone who had walked through fire and come out clearer. My son grinned at me. "You look happy," he said softly. I smiled back. "I am." Walking out of that salon, the sun warm on our faces, I realized the power of small acts of recovery. It was not about the hair. It was about reclaiming something that had been taken from me. For too long, I let her define how I looked, where I sat, who I was allowed to be. That day, I took it back. The weeks turned into months. Court dates were set. Lawyers were contacted. The process was slow, but steady. Each step brought me further away from the grip she once had. Relatives who had doubted me began to see the truth as documents surfaced, signatures revealed, lies untangled. My phone filled with apologies that came too late. I answered none of them. At home, I started setting new boundaries. My husband had to choose where he stood. For the first time, I told him clearly that silence was no longer an option. If he wanted a life with me and our son, he had to stand with us, not behind her. He did not answer immediately, but his actions spoke slowly. He attended every meeting with the police. He apologized not with words, but with consistency. Trust would take time, but I saw the effort. One night, I sat on the porch watching the stars while my son slept inside. The air was cool, the world quiet. I thought about everything that had happened, every insult, every slight, every attempt to erase me. For years, I had told myself I was enduring for the sake of peace. But peace built on silence is not peace at all. It is surrender. I took a deep breath, inhaling the crisp night air, and whispered to myself, "No more." The final hearing came months later. I walked into the courtroom with steady steps, my folder of evidence in hand. She sat at the opposite table, her face painted in practiced calm, but her eyes betrayed her. Fear lingered there, thinly veiled by arrogance. The judge listened as the lawyers presented the case, each document spread across the desk like scars turned into testimony. When it was over, the judgment was clear. She was guilty of falsifying signatures and attempting to alter legal documents. The consequences were hers to bear. The room erupted with murmurs, relatives whispering, reporters scribbling notes. I stayed still, my hands folded neatly, my face calm. She glared at me as they led her out, her lips shaping silent words I could not hear. Perhaps she called me a traitor. Perhaps she cursed me. It did not matter. Her power over me was gone. Afterward, my son and I walked out into the sunlight together. He held my hand tightly, looking up at me with wide eyes. "Does this mean we're free now?" he asked. I squeezed his hand. "Yes, we're free." We drove home with the windows down, the wind rushing in, laughter bubbling between us. For the first time in years, the weight on my chest was gone. I was no longer waiting for the next insult, the next exclusion, the next scheme. I had drawn a line, and she had crossed it. Now the world knew. That night, as I tucked my son into bed, he whispered, "I'm glad you're my mom." The words washed over me like balm on an old wound. I kissed his forehead and whispered back, "I'm glad too." Later, I sat alone at the kitchen table, sipping tea, staring at the folder that had once been my shield. I closed it gently, slid it into a drawer, and locked it. Not because I wanted to forget, but because I no longer needed it at arm's reach. She had told me I was not part of the family. She was wrong. Family is not defined by her signatures or her approval. It is defined by love, by truth, by the bonds we choose to protect. And I chose mine. I do not know if she realized what she lost that night at the dinner table. Maybe she still believes she won, but I know the truth. She lost the control she prized most. She lost the power to erase me. And in that loss, I finally found my freedom.